Julie Menin is the Speaker of the New York City Council, and this was her first budget negotiation. But there's been so much that has happened since the budget that we have to start with that.
Yes.
First of all, there's a major outbreak of Legionnaires disease on the Upper East Side, which happens to be your district.
Yes.
Now, I know that you're not satisfied with what the city's doing. You've written a letter to the mental health commissioner, the health commissioner, asking for more. What are you looking for, and what do you think people need to know to protect themselves?
Well, Marcia, this is a very serious case. We have to remember that certainly on the east side of Manhattan, we have a large senior population, and the seniors are more susceptible to contracting Legionnaires and more susceptible to dying from Legionnaires. What I am concerned about is, first of all, the health department has still not been able to identify the source, which is deeply concerning. We're almost a week into this crisis. Secondly, I am insisting, and I sent a letter to the health commissioner last night about this, and I've been insisting at every town hall we've had, that they start disinfecting now. Why wait? Every single day that they wait to mandate that these towers be disinfected is another day that more and more people are contracting this. As of yesterday, there were 28 cases, 21 of which are now in the hospital. This is very serious, with a 10% mortality rate.
But you're not satisfied with even with disinfecting the water towers where there's been an outbreak. You want more towers to be disinfected just in case.
I do, because right now they've tested about 87% of the towers, but they still don't have the test results back, and 13% they haven't tested at all. So why not start with the 13% and start with the towers where they don't have the test results back? By the way, they know where the epicenter is, so certainly disinfecting immediately around that area is mission critical. So I don't understand this kind of response. I've been very vocal about it. People are at risk of dying, and we now have 21 cases, and 28 cases, 21 of which have required hospitalization. Every single hour that passes, more and more people are going to get sick from this.
So why aren't they taking it more seriously?
I don't know. It's been very frustrating, and my constituents are very frustrated as well, and that is why we are demanding an increase, a more proactive, aggressive response on this.
So from moving to a Legionnaires crisis to another crisis, a building collapse in Midtown that has sort of paralyzed Midtown in a very critical area. I wonder, this raises a lot of questions. First of all, the quality of the building inspections, and I wonder if it's something that the City Council wants to investigate and maybe change how we inspect buildings.
Well, certainly. We know that there were numerous violations in this incident. There's also, there was non-union labor there, and so there is a concern about where corners cut, what was really happening. We know that the Buildings Department is doing an investigation. Obviously, from the council perspective, we are going to be looking at this to see, do we need to perhaps legislate additional standards? Do we need to tighten certain regulations to make sure that something like this never happens again? This was an office to residential conversion, of which there'll be many in the Midtown area. And so this is something that we really need to, fully support the office to residential conversion and building more affordable housing. That is absolutely critical. But we need to get some answers in terms of what DOB knew, what they did in terms of enforcement or lack thereof.
But it also raises another question. You have a lot of people who say, not in my backyard. They're really worried about construction. When you have something like this happen, doesn't it shake the foundations of public confidence about how things are being carried out? And could it affect future office buildings to residential conversions?
Well, we have a lot of questions about what DOB knew, about the violations, about how quickly they were corrected, about additional inspections. There seemed to, at cursory look, be a lack of fines that were assessed here. So these are all questions that we're going to be looking at. We want to make sure the public feels safe. We don't want a situation where people are concerned about this. And obviously, the building collapse was very, very concerning. So we need to get to the bottom of the answers. We need an expedited investigation. And the council's looking at what oversight we will be doing in terms of perhaps a legislative fix and additional regulations that need to happen so we can assure the public that these office to residential conversions are indeed safe.
So I guess the question also is, there was an over-reliance, it seems, on outside non-city inspectors. And the question is that a good thing? Do there have to be more controls in place to check up on the non-city inspectors who are doing apparently a lot of the work.
Yes, we absolutely need to do that. We need to make sure that the buildings department is backfilling the vacancies, that there's not a delay at OMB in terms of hiring. We've been hearing at a lot of agencies that there's a real backlog at OMB in terms of hiring into the vacant positions. And so to the extent that DOB is outsourcing those inspections, that is of great concern to the City Council. And so these are all questions we have. We will be holding a hearing on this to really get some answers.
So I'd also like to talk to you about another thing. You know, during the campaign, the mayor promised that he would look at the no-bid contracts in the Department of Education,
right,
because there's about $13 billion
exactly
worth of no-bid contracts for all kinds of services. Now, I know that you have been trying to get some answers from the Department of Education, and you've come up against a brick wall. What are you trying to do about that?
So this is a huge area of concern right now, Marcia. Back in February, the council passed my bill that eradicates the long-term use of no-bid contracts, because we know, for example, in the de Blasio administration, they suspended the use of no-bid contracts 100 times during COVID and spent about $7 billion on protective equipment. We know in the Adams administration, no-bid contract was suspended during the asylum seeker crisis to the tune of about $4 billion. So my bill prohibits a long-term use of no-bid contracts and restricts them to an emergency. Now we have a situation which, as you point out, $12.9 billion of the education budget is spent on these outside contracts, many of which are no-bid. I have been demanding a copy of these contracts since March. We have not received the contract still from the DOE.
How is that acceptable?
It's not acceptable because it interferes with the council's oversight provisions. They have given us every excuse under the book. The first excuse was it would take too much time. Well, it doesn't take too much time. We're talking about 600 contracts that literally is a couple hours of work to download them onto a file and provide them to the City Council. Then they said they didn't have the staff to do it. Let's remember, DOE is the largest city agency budget, about $40 billion. You can't tell me you don't have a staff member who can download the contracts.
But also, if you're trying to find efficiencies, doesn't it behoove the City Council to look at where the money is being spent? Because maybe you could find ways to do it cheaper.
Exactly. And that's why we want the contract, so we can see, is there a duplication of work? Are there efficiencies that in no way cut services, but that where we're able to actually save money moving forward? So we've been asking for these contracts for months. Yesterday, I sent yet another letter to the Chancellor demanding that they provide these contracts and demanding a production schedule on when we're going to get these contracts. This is inexcusable.
But the Chancellor was at a City Council budget hearing. He was asked about it, and still nothing?
No, still nothing. We just get more excuses. So this is not going to go away for us. We are going to continue ratcheting up the pressure until we get the contracts, because that is performing our oversight. This is $12.9 billion of the education budget on these outside consultants. And we really want to get to the bottom of, well, what is the city paying for all these consultants? We also learned at the hearing that DOE has never actually audited these contracts. So that was another thing that came out, which is, why is there no auditing of these contracts? So there are a lot of questions we have. And again, it is incumbent upon DOE to provide the council with these contracts. We're not asking for an analysis of the contracts. We're merely asking a copy of the contracts.
So let's turn to yet another hot button issue for the council, and that is what you're going to do about the carriages, the horse carriages, after a tourist died. I know there's been a recent study by the Central Park Conservancy that shows New Yorkers really don't want the horse carriages. But at the council, there's only 16 sponsors so far, and that would mean they need another 10 in order to pass the bill. Where are we on that?
Well, I think support is definitely growing for Rider's Law. I talked to many of the members, and I believe more members are going to be signing on. Look, we need to take some action. I mean, what happened with this tourist death was completely unconscionable, unacceptable, and preventable. It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. And so we do need to take some action. We are having a hearing next week, and the hearing is our opportunity to basically talk to all the stakeholders. I've been meeting with TWU, I've been meeting with the Central Park Conservancy, I've been meeting with NYCLAS and other animal rights advocates, and I am confident that we can put forward a good solution here.
All right, on that note, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But up next, the men fighting to get the homeless off the streets, out of shelters, and into permanent housing. We are back with Council Speaker Julie Menin, who negotiated her first budget and had some amazing successes, although you had to go down to the wire, especially with city FEPS, which
Yes.
there was some reluctance on the part of the mayor to increase it, but you were very persistent and you got him to add some more money. Why is that so important? Why is housing vouchers such an important program in New York City?
Well, Marcia, it's so important because it's protecting our most vulnerable. We want to be able to have people go into supportive housing. We don't want people staying in the shelter system. It costs $54 a day to house someone through a city FEPS voucher versus $270 a day to house someone in the shelter system. It's also the right thing to do to try to create this pathway towards supportive housing. So we fought very hard, and we did hold up the budget at the end to basically get a win on that issue, to increase this year's funding for city FEPS, but also to reach a settlement with the mayor to get him to drop the lawsuit against the council and to create a settlement that created a new city council bill that took the program from one of an entitlement program to one that is subject to appropriations. And that was important so we could overall contain the cost of FEPS, which was each and every year ballooning. So we want to be able to make sure that we have a voucher system that is sustainable.
I think though that a lot of people didn't understand the administration extreme reluctance to agree to it, and the fact that there was there were ballooning costs that were impacting the budget.
Right. Well, the ballooning costs would have made it unsustainable, and that doesn't inure to anyone's benefit. We want to be able to protect vulnerable New Yorkers, but we also need to make sure that we've got a program that fiscally is sustainable. And so that was really what this agreement was all about. We did an increase this year for FEPS to cover vulnerable New Yorkers and get them out of the shelter system.
30,000 more people.
Correct. We did a settlement with the mayor, which forced him to drop the lawsuit suing the council. And most importantly, we passed our new bill as part of the settlement that, again, overall contains the costs of FEPS and makes sure that we have a sustainable program each and every year so that we can protect vulnerable New Yorkers, but we're not doing it at a way that we're bankrupting the city and we can't sustain that kind of support.
So another thing that you were able to do, which was personally interesting to me, was you got money for testing the air, studying the air tests at 9/11 on Ground Zero. And, it came after there was absolute denial after 9/11 that the air was in any way infected. And then hundreds, if not more, people got sick from breathing the air. And then all of a sudden, the discovery of a cache of records that had to do with air quality. So your money is going to do what?
The money is basically going to finally go to releasing the 9/11 files. We've waited 25 years for this. As you know, I've been very involved in efforts around 9/11. I chaired the local community board down there for 7 years. I owned a business, a restaurant and catering business that was decimated on 9/11. It was located a couple blocks away from Ground Zero. I lived a couple blocks away from Ground Zero. My mother lived with us. She died of a 9/11 related cancer. As chair of the community board, I fought very hard to create the World Trade Center Health Registry so that first responders and downtown residents were covered. Now we have a situation where we're heading into the 25th anniversary, and finally we're going to have justice and have these files released. So that's what the money is going to, and it is the right thing to do. Thousands and thousands of New Yorkers, so many first responders who ran into this site to protect New Yorkers, ended up dying from cancer because the city of New York and the federal EPA told New Yorkers the air was safe to breathe. They told us to remain downtown, and we all did. And so many people, my mother included, lost their lives as a result.
But see, here's the question. As I recall, it was the federal EPA and then had Christy Todd Whitman who said, safe to breathe the air. Don't worry about it. You can go back into your buildings. So if the Department of Education determines, after looking at these records, that that wasn't the case, what are the fiscal implications for the federal government in making good on something that caused a lot of deaths?
Well, this is an excellent question. And, as someone who's practiced law a long time, from a legal perspective, that will be one of the main questions that is going to come out of this, because Christy Todd Whitman did time and time again say, remain downtown. The air was safe to breathe. As a result, first responders were told by the city in the first couple of days, you don't need protective equipment. So we had first responders working on the pile, breathing in that toxic plume day after day after day.
But so were you, because you were living down there.
Correct, I was, and you know, I'm one of the lucky ones who so far I haven't been diagnosed with any cancer, but my mother was not so lucky. And my mother went to a doctor's appointment the morning of 9/11. We couldn't find her till 4. She came back home covered in the dust, head to toe covered in that dust, and she ended up dying from a very rare 9/11 related cancer. That is the story, sadly, of so many families who are either downtown residents or first responders. So the city has sat on these files each and every year and refused to release them. And this is just not right. It's not accountable, it's not transparent, and it's not the right thing to do. Hopefully, and God forbid, we never have another 9/11, but we need to have protocols in place in terms of air quality. We need to have protocols in place for how the city advises people in dealing with these kinds of tragedies.
But do you think there's also going to be suits filed against the federal government?
There will absolutely be suits filed against the federal government. Look, at the end of the day, to have the head of the federal EPA, who, by the way, was not even at the site when she was issuing these proclamations. She was ensconced in D.C., that the air was safe to breathe. When any of us, I mean, you were down there, I was down there, you could smell that acrid smell week after week.
And you could never forget it.
Correct. It defied all common sense. It didn't, no pun intended, pass the smell test that the air was not safe to breathe. I mean, the fact that they were saying this is just not acceptable. And so, yes, there probably will be many lawsuits against the federal government.
So I need to ask you another budget question. I know that down to the wire, there was this, before that, there was a promise by the mayor to hire 580 new police officers. Right. And at the 11.7% hour, he changed his mind.
Right.
And you were blindsided.
Well, it was unacceptable. Look, back in March when we had the public safety hearing, I pushed to have over 5,000 cops hired, because that had been the commitment from the year prior. And so I pressed the NYPD on, well, don't you need these additional 5,000 cops? Because we know in certain crime categories, in rapes and felony assaults, hate crimes, subway crime are all skyrocketing. So that is very, very concerning. Back in June at our public safety hearing, the commissioner indicated that 580 cops would be hired, which we were very pleased about, and that would have been very, very good news. This 11th hour pulling of the cops is unacceptable. The budget, you know, had already been printed by the time that I got a call from the mayor about that. I think this is absolutely the wrong choice. We are going to continue to fight this. We do not think that's acceptable. But Marcia, I want to be clear. We added $300 million to the NYPD budget. So that is still in there, $300 million extra this year. That's versus $120 million in the year prior. So that additional funding goes to overtime and other matters. But we believe very, very strongly that those 580 cops should be hired. And we are seeing in certain categories crime going up. It is deeply, deeply concerning. We fought very hard for those cops, and to pull them at the last minute is not acceptable.
Well, the reason I'm asking the question is because all during the mayoral campaign, the mayor argued that you needed to have cops not do as much because the overtime was taxing and that it was driving a lot of people to quit the department because it was just too much. And so now what we're seeing is, yes, they're going to have to work a lot of overtime. Think about what happened on July 4th when they had to work 12-hour tours for over a week.
Right.
So the arguments he made about the cops overworking, now they're going to be overworking again because he didn't hire the extra cops.
It's not the right thing to do in terms of driving crime down. It's also fiscally not the right thing to do because, to your point, overtime is going to go through the roof. So
which has always been a concern of the city council.
Correct. It's always been a concern. So we strongly object to this, and we're going to continue to fight it. So
from overtime to salary hikes, there has been a hearing about including an increase in the salaries of citywide elected officials and the city council. And the city council has not had a raise for 10 years.
Right. I mean, my position on this has been very, very clear. I don't believe elected officials should ever be raising salaries for themselves. I have a fundamental issue with that. which is why I believe the right path is the one that was taken, which is done through an independent commission. The independent commission that was appointed by the mayor made certain salary recommendations across the board for different city officials. I will not be taking the salary increase because, again, I don't want to go into any type of conflict of interest. I did not appoint this commission. Again, the commissioners are appointed by the mayor, but I am the speaker of the city council. And for my colleagues who really had fought very hard for this, I want to be respectful of their viewpoint, but I'm not going to take it. And so, moving forward, the independent commission has recommended these salary increases across the board for different city officials, and that then does require a city council bill to ratify the commission's recommendation. So that bill will be voted on.
But the council has not had a raise since 2016.
Correct. The council has not had a raise in a long time. And that is, again, why doing this through the independent commission was the right way to do it, because it allows an independent commission to look at it. And the independent commission agreed that not only the city council members, but all city officials should have a raise. And so that is, again, what we will be doing is we will be ratifying what the commission came up with.
I just want to, as we end the show, I want to ask you about something that's sort of like the third rail, which has to do with school funding. I know that there are a number of schools that have a drop in enrollment, but there's been a move to keep the funding flat. But according to my research, there's 150 schools that have an enrollment that's 100 students or less, and there are 200 schools that have also low enrollment. And the question is, should any of these schools be combined so that you can maybe save some money in the education budget?
Well, look, one of the things that I think we have to focus on moving forward is reading and math scores, which we are spending more per pupil than almost any other major municipality across the country, and yet, unfortunately, the reading and math scores are not where they should be. And so we have to focus on that. In terms of the budget and combining schools, obviously for parents who, would be subject to that, that can be, very difficult and very, very controversial for them. So I think what we've really got to figure out is, why is it that we're spending so much per pupil and not getting some of the results on the test scores?
Maybe it's those outside no-bid contracts.
Well, look, we're spending $12.9 billion on these outside contracts that I've been trying to get for the last couple months. I mean, that is a real area of savings, and we really need to think outside of the box on how we can improve the educational outcomes for these students. One of the things I'm very excited about that I got in the budget was we are doing a $1,000 college savings account for every public school kindergartner. This is so exciting. I launched this program, Marcia, over a decade ago, where we seeded every.
But it was $100. It was $100, and now you raised it.
And
to
now
$1,000.
we raised it to $1,000, and it's invested in the state's 529, so it grows over time. It can be used for vocational school, for a 2-year community college, for a 4-year college. And what's so great about it is that studies show that a low-income child with a college savings account is 3 times more likely to go to college than someone who doesn't have one, and earn 60% more wages in the course of their lifetime. So if we really want to attack income inequality, this is one of the best ways to do so. So I couldn't be more proud of this program, and that this will be the largest college savings program in the country. It also teaches financial empowerment, financial literacy. Parents can contribute into the account. Local businesses can adopt a classroom. So this is really an unbelievable moment, and one that I'm really very proud of.
Council Speaker Julie Menin, thank you for joining us. Thank you at home for joining us as well.